It's always fun predicting the future. Fiercely Independent, a person who wrote a few comments on my channel, wrote, I believe Katie Britt will win the 2028 GOP presidential primary. The electorate has a short-term memory. They will forget the SOTU speech. Trust me. GOP electorate cares more about who is most conservative sounding, not about policy. I believe Katie Britt will win. Wish Ramaswamy would win GOP primary though. Thank you and best wishes to your channel. So I don't invoke Fiercely Independent to, you know, make fun of him or to try and say anything disparaging. I just mentioned him because that's the first instance where I've seen someone on my stuff say that they believe she's going to even run for president. And I think it's always interesting to kind of think about things in the near future, or at least see how they turn out versus what we believed at the time. The 2028 presidential election is going to be very different from 2016, 2020, 2024, in that on neither side is there a clear front runner at this point. So for 2016, on the Democratic side, it was Hillary, to where a bunch of Democrats wouldn't even bother entertaining the idea of running. On the Republican side, you had Scott Walker and Jeb Bush and the rest of these other people that just fizzled out very quickly when Trump took over. In 2020, for the Democrats, it was Sanders, Biden, at various points O'Rourke and Warren, and then on the Republican side it was Trump, obviously. And then 2024 for the Republicans has been a kind of a repeat of what the Democrats had in 2016, where there was such a obvious front runner status for this person, with Trump being analogous to Hillary in 2016, to where a lot of Republicans this time around were like, I'm not even going to bother. 2028 is going to be the first cycle where there's no clear, direct front runner, because I don't think, whether this election goes one way or the other, I don't think Trump or Biden will run again. I think this is it for both of them, their final campaigns. And on the Democratic side, there's not a heir apparent for Biden. I know Harris as the VP is the person that would theoretically take the reins, but we've seen a record in the past of the person who was vice president not being the one who is the successor or the intended successor. So this was the case with Biden in 2016, with Cheney in 2008. It's been a recent trend that just because someone's vice president doesn't mean they're going to either attempt or successfully take the reins from the person that they served under. The most recent one to try doing that was Pence, and we saw that turned out this time around. So assuming that Harris is somehow, I think she will run in 2028, excuse me. I'm getting my years mixed up. But assuming that she runs in 4 years and is somehow able to, through a combination of corporate media and lies, entice the Democratic electorate to pick her over some other person that is probably more well-liked, I can see where the Republicans may look at someone like Britt as kind of their answer, where in a lot of cases we're seeing this thing of, right now people are talking about Trump's running mate should be a woman because it'll help with women voters, and Biden's VP is a woman, so it's kind of matching the same pattern. But the problem with predicting the Republican side right now is that there's such a giant just pool of people that could possibly run in this hypothetical post-Trump era. I mean, if we're going off of just senators, you have Cruz, Rubio, Rand, Graham might even attempt again, Ernst, out of Iowa. There's so many other people who've been around in the Senate longer than Britt that could end up trying to run against her. And it's hard to stand out in such a giant crowded field. But I should say that in 2028, Britt will be up for re-election to a potential second term in the Senate. Now, of course, if she decides to run again, it's Alabama, it's a red state, she could win pretty easily. But we don't know if she's going to be in the same situation that Rubio was in 2016, where he was up for re-election to the Senate and he was like, you know what, whether I win this election or not, I'm not going to run for another term in the Senate. And after he got creamed in Florida and dropped out, he decided to have a change of heart. Well, he tried to say that the Parkland, the Orlando nightclub shooting caused him to do that, but I don't believe it. So Britt could theoretically try to get state law in Alabama changed. I don't know if it's even on the books right now that you can run for two elections at the same time so that she can keep her Senate seat or run for her Senate seat simultaneously while seeking the presidency, which I would fully support because, I'm nonpartisan when it comes to just electoral laws. So Biden was able to run for vice president and run for another term in the Senate in 2008. Same thing with LBJ in 1960. I mean, it's nothing that I have a problem with because it's been done before and there's a precedent for it. So she would not stoke any critique from me for doing that. I think it says something about people, they always want to have that backup plan available. But right now, there's two issues I have with, because the prediction on his part was that he believed she would win the nomination. I think there's a good chance she might run for it, even if, putting aside the whole, like, are you going to seek a second term in the Senate or are you going to run for president? But when it comes to her actually winning it, I'm not so sure. One of the reasons is that the field is most likely going to be really, really crowded. It's probably going to be the first Republican primary where there's multiple women running too. Like I think Ernst might run. I think Noam, in spite of her dog slaying ways, probably will try to take a shot because she doesn't have anywhere to go after being governor. There's a good chance MTG might throw her hat in the ring. We've already seen one. There's a video of her like admitting that she might try in 2028, which disturbed me, but we'll get into that another time. So I'm just pointing out that this field could be really massive. It could be 15 people. It could be 30 people. I'm not joking when I say it could end up being one of the biggest fields in all of presidential election history. And it's going to be hard for her as a one-term senator to stand out. Now, to her credit, she has been able to amass attention for herself a lot more than other, not even just first-term senators, but ones that haven't even been in office for 2 years. I mean, she's completely eclipsed Tumberville, however you say his name, the football coach, the senior senator from Alabama, completely has way more attention online than he does. But it's still a matter of how do you stand out. And I said one of the things a lot of people who've been successful at doing this have been able to do, whether you're talking about Trump, Obama, Bush, going down the list, is that they can sound and speak as if they represent either the common man or in some populist manner. I hate to make this comparison because people will think I'm trying to get at something I'm not, but I'm going to compare Britt to the only person from Alabama that honestly had any chance of actually becoming president, George Wallace. Wallace was the most recent presidential candidate that was a third-party candidate to win multiple states in a presidential election. And part of that was name recognition. The other part is that he had this ability, whether we're talking about the whole like segregation thing, whatever, but he was very good at speaking in a manner that addressed the social ills of the time. Government encroachment. They've completely abandoned you for the others. Just this idea of us versus them. And Britt so far has not really championed any issue in any capacity that makes her sound like someone who could carry up that same type of speaking style or rhetorical ability. I know a lot of, he said that people would forget the State of the Union speech, but I brought it up because your first chance to talk to people and have like the spotlight centered on you flopped. And in watching many of her other speeches, attempts at just public speaking, I don't think she sounds sincere. It's difficult to explain, but I think if someone is talking and they just speak in their regular tone of voice like I think I'm doing right now, it's a lot better than with Britt's whole thing of, we hear you and we understand you and I'm the proud mother of two children. It's not something that she has to do. She's clearly been rehearsed by some crappy campaign advisors, staffers. And again, that type of stuff, robotic crap, it works when you're trying to win some statewide elections. But in a national one, I don't think so. And also, I should say, one of the other reasons I compared Britt to Wallace is that Alabama is a very small state. Not one of the smallest, but it's like in that middle range. And unfortunately, it's a lot harder to build up national profile when you're the representative or some person elected to a government position from a smaller state. That's why if you look at most of these successful presidential candidates in recent times, they tend to come from New York, Texas, even the ones that people talk about that don't make it, like DeSantis, right, from Florida, Jeb Bush, Florida. Um, Really, the only reason Biden was finally able to crack through the dam of never being elected president despite wanting it all his life is that even though he was from Delaware, which is a very small state, he was someone that could reliably appear as experienced, which is why Obama picked him for VP. As a 30-something year senator. And that national profile from being VP allowed him to later coast off of his name recognition to defeating Trump as the alternative to the insanity of 2017 to 2020. So, Biden wasn't really affected by it anymore. And that's why I thought Britt made a lot more sense as a VP candidate, at least in this, before trying to run for president. Because if she were hypothetically picked by Trump for VP this time around, which I don't think she will be, but if she were, whether they won or not, she would go into the next election cycle with a very heightened amount of name recognition, kind of like how Sarah Palin did. And then whatever she chooses to do with that after the fact is going to get reported and talked about, because there's this belief, whether it's true or not, that she's going to run for president herself in the next cycle. But yeah, it's, you could say it's too early to speculate about something like this. But I find it so interesting how this senator who's only been in office for 1 year has been able to eclipse a lot of her colleagues in attention. And people are not wrong when they say she is a rising star of her party. She didn't just get picked for the Supreme Court speech for no reason. There's clearly a vested interest in this lady either taking over the party as, like, let's say, Senate Majority Leader in 10 years, or being picked for VP by, if not Trump, then some other person that might come down the line. I will say that because Harris has had this problem, because I try to be fair when I talk, because Harris has had this problem with likability and with appearing to even like resonate with voters. And I said before that when Biden picked her, he didn't actually get any new voters. He just picked her out of a pledge to the representative from South Carolina, Clyburn, who said that he wanted him to pick a woman of color as his running mate. Because Harris has such a problem with appearing likable, with speaking, as much as I've ragged on Britt, I think if it were Harris versus Britt would have a decent shot of beating her. And a lot of it comes down to Harris just not being an effective campaigner. This is the same, and this goes back to my point of how it's so much easier to win statewide races than presidential election ones. Harris is someone who, despite being seen as a rising star for the Democratic Party after she was elected to the Senate, going all these different fundraisers and whatnot, and polling pretty well when the race first started and even after her debate performances initially, her campaign crashed and burned in the span of months. This is an inauthentic lady who has taken positions. I'd hate to compare her to Hillary, but actually I won't even compare her to Hillary, because at least Hillary was able to come in second place in the 2008 primary and then win it in 2016. I think Harris is someone who, the only way she's going to win a presidential election is if the media gives her a piggyback ride, and which she's already getting that by being picked as Biden's VP. She's getting, like the extended name recognition and whatnot, but she's just not someone I can see voters willingly selecting over most of the other Republicans that could possibly run against her. And one thing that Britt does have that a lot of her colleagues don't is that she doesn't have any of the kiss the ring aspects. Like, if Britt runs in 2028, she could easily criticize Haley, Cruz, Rubio, any of the other ones. Hey, you guys talk so strong about how, you don't like this or that, and you're consistent, but I'm the most consistent of you all. You can't find old videos of me saying that Trump was not qualified to be president, and then after I get creamed against him, I'm suddenly in favor of him. That is something that she does have over a lot of these other people by virtue of being a much newer national figure than the rest of them. But there's also one more elephant in the room that we have to talk about, which is, do I think the Republican electorate, the Republican voters, a majority of them, in 4 years are going to be willing to pick a woman to be their nominee? I just can't see it. Like, I think there's a solid 30, like Haley, to her credit, was able to get 4 million votes this time around, and I do think a lot of the people who didn't vote for her were just way more liking of Trump than they were like necessarily despising of her. But even a lot of the ones that are just complete Trump diehards, like MTG and Noam and Lake and Stefanik and Huckabee Sanders, I can't see the Republican voters being like, yeah, this person, they're Trump's heir, they're his heir apparent, they're his successor. I can't view them as being willing to do that for most of these people. Um, Again, I hope I'm wrong, because, and I make this very clear, I don't enjoy saying that you can't win an election because of your ethnicity or your gender. Um, but it's just not something I've seen their side as being willing to do. That, like, every time one of these Republican women decides to run, whether it's Bachman, Fiorina, Haley's another good example. They have some polling surges. They have periods where it looks like, they're winning this, that, or the other, right? So these polls, when it's actually time to come down and vote for them, they crash and burn. They go down in flames. And I'm not saying that automatically has to happen to Britt. It has been, over 10 years since we've had, like, at least a woman running in most of these election cycles on the Republican side. But I don't know if in 4 short years they're going to change that quickly. I hope they do. Like, I'm not even trying to be funny. I have no more ill will towards Britt than any of the other people that could end up being the nominee in 2028. But I just don't see it. So yeah, I think there's a good chance that she might run for president. Um, I think there's a much smaller chance that she's actually going to win a nomination. And if she runs and wins a nomination, I will be the first person to say I was wrong. There's plenty of stuff where when I predicted, I've been incorrect before. I would love to be incorrect on this, because I don't enjoy thinking that one of the two major parties' electorates doesn't like people based off of, things that they can't control. But I just can't see that, them changing that quick. So I hope you enjoyed the analysis, and this will be a fun video to come back to in 2028.